world, rapid transformation taking place. Ecosystems are being reimagined, commercial priorities are being refocused, and identifying ready-made skills is the priority. However, this then leads us to think about, what does this mean for us on a personal note? It's not anything about how or where you work. It's about, how do you become the best version of yourself in any environment you walk into? And I know for everyone listening on this call, as Black professionals, you are understanding that your journey is layered. You understand that you are focused on how you learn and develop in your own gaps. You're thinking about how you stay relevant. You're thinking about how you ultimately position yourself as an asset without shrinking, without compromise, and basically focused on how you win in every aspect of your life and enjoying what you do, and also trying to build relationships that matter to ensure you show up fully and authentically. We also know that charting this path is and can be isolating, especially when you're seen as the blueprint by your network and in spaces that you enter. However, I want you to think about how you navigate this journey as a journey of evolution. It's one where you're able to deepen your skills and your levels of awareness. It's one where you are not consumed by the challenges, but you're focused on the opportunities. It's one where you can leverage your experience with meaningful growth. So today we're going to talk about navigating that transformation with confidence, building authentic networks, translating experience to opportunities, staying true to yourself, and thriving professionally. And I really want to introduce you all to an incredible woman who is really powerful in how she approaches things. I know I'm speaking very highly of her, not just because she's my boss, but because I also get a front row seat in seeing how she leads, how she navigates change, and ultimately how she enables businesses to think differently. So we're joined by Nadia Strone, whose leadership journey reflects that of power, kindness, purpose, and intentionality. So Nadia, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into the questions.
Thank you so much, Adeife. That's such a warm welcome. I'm humbled and probably blushing by that introduction. So I am Nadia Strone. I have the joy and privilege of being Chief People Officer at Euromonitor International, which is my dream job come true. And I have spent 20 plus years as an HR professional, navigating all sorts of organizations in heavy change and transformation. It's become a bit of my specialty almost by accident. I tend to gravitate towards organizations going through heavy change and transformation. And on the personal side, I'm an American. I grew up in New York. I moved across the pond to the UK 8.5 years ago now, and I'm a dual citizen currently, and I have two little girls who are 10 and 7, and when I'm not busy being a people person, I'm busy being a mom.
Thank you so much, Nadia. And let's jump into it, because I also want to make sure that we give enough room for questions. So I give this opening now. As we're talking, if you have questions, please send them all to the chat, and we will try and make sure we reach every single one of them as best as we can do. But let's jump into it. Let's talk about the leadership journey, Nadia. You know, you talked about being the person that is drawn to organizations, that is navigating change. But let's take a little bit step back and just understand you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your experiences that has shaped your leadership journey and how they've influenced how you lead today.
So much of what I've learned about leadership, I think so much of what we all see of leadership is role modeled for us, and whether that's good or bad. I think we all can reflect on examples that we've seen of leaders that have either inspired us or leaders that have completely disinspired us. And I think it's equally important to experience both, because from that we can emulate what's good, and we can have a clear differentiator in our minds about what we don't want to be. And I've had the privilege of having some brilliant leaders, and I've also seen some examples of what I know I don't want to be, and that's equally powerful. Sometimes it's even more powerful to identify what you don't want to show up as.
Yeah. And how would you then define your success in your career, right? You know, part of our careers is shaped by the leaders that we engage with. And I think, as you rightly said, it does then challenge us to think, what are the things we want to adopt? What are the things we want to keep the same and maintain? But in navigating that journey, how has that, or what has defined your success in your career? And has that definition of success evolved over time?
It's definitely evolved. I mean, I can think back to my younger self and early career days when my focus was about a lot of linear movement and how do I progress? How do I get promoted? How do I get to the next level? You know, I remember sitting there in moments thinking, oh, I can't wait until I'm important enough to be in those meetings and in those discussions and in those decisions. Um, and as I've progressed and as I've grown and as I think, my priorities have shifted, um, for me, success today is far more about the level of excitement I have towards work and feeling excited to get to work every day, is far more impactful as a measure of success than any title or salary I've had.
Wow. And I think that's interesting that you say that, because for, like you said, for a lot of time we look very vertical in terms of our growth. But I think over time it does definitely evolve. It's less about the title and just more about, you know, being happy and successful in your own, I guess.
Mhm.
How would you, based on that and based on how your journey is shaping, because I say it is shaping because I think we're all in a constant state of evolution. How do you help others then find their purpose and kindness in your own leadership path?
So for me, purpose and tapping into your own purpose is about really peeling back the layers of what motivates you and trying to get to the core of why. We can all look at our calendar for the week and very quickly tap into what are the things that bring us joy and what are the things that bring us dread. And tapping further into your purpose is about trying to understand why for both instances and looking for the work that really motivates you and excites you and amplifying that and finding a way to cope with the work that feels a bit of a drag. Um, and when you can amplify the work that's truly meaningful for you, you are tapping into what you find purpose in. And very often, if you peel back those layers, you get to a root cause of why that work excites you. What is it about those interactions? What is it about those projects that really excites you? And underlying is your purpose. Kindness is a tricky balance. I think sometimes we misconstrue kindness for niceness, and there is a bit of a difference, and striking the right balance can be tricky. Very often we shy away from having difficult conversations because we're trying to be nice, or we think it's unkind to have difficult conversations. But really, quite the opposite is true. It is far more unkind not to share the constructive feedback, for example, not to share how an interaction left you feeling. We do far more good for people when we honestly and constructively share what's good, what's working, what perhaps is not working, what's being perceived negatively. And when people are aware of how they're perceived and the impact that they're having, they can do something about it. Then it's up to them to react and do something about it. If we withhold that information, we're just doing them a disservice. And that's deeply unkind when we're talking about how we lift people up and help set them up for success.
That's so powerful. I think there's something I want to just deeper in what you said, because, and I'm going to flip it slightly. because everything you're saying is correct. We are actually giving the best gift when we get a true reflective feedback that enables us to operate or pivot in a different line that aligns us to reaching our goals. But I think sometimes as professionals, when we're receiving that feedback, it sometimes feels quite personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so your response isn't necessarily to act in a strategic manner. Your response might sometimes be to pull back or completely shut down. For those that are in the room now that have maybe responded in that way, Nadia, is there any advice you can give to people on how they respond back to feedback, especially when it's potentially aimed at setting you up for success?
So whoever came up with the idea that this isn't personal, I'd like to have a word. It is deeply personal. Our work is deeply personal. And and why wouldn't it be? It's our blood, sweat, tears. It's time away from our families. It's time away from our the things that, we love to do outside of work. And so of course it feels deeply personal. And we all start every day with the best of intentions. And so we are trying our best. And especially if you don't have a full picture of how that's landing, it can be quite jarring to then be told, well, this is a mismatch or that's not quite working well. So it is deeply personal, and it is okay to feel that it is personal. I'd equally like to have a word with whoever said it's not okay to cry at work, because it absolutely is for the same reasons. And when we acknowledge and accept the fact that it is personal, it is emotional, and we meet people where they are, we can open and deepen our relationships to tap into far more meaningfulness than if we're just following a script that says, well, I have to give you this feedback, and however it lands, it lands. Connecting with people and really ensuring that we are giving messages with the purest of intent, and we're positioning it in a way that this is for your benefit. I'm doing this because I care about your success.
Yeah.
Allows people to feel far more receptive. I feel like you're vested in me then. And that you're genuinely showing up as someone who cares about whether or not I'm successful. And though it might be difficult to digest, I can come back from it. I can go away, I can reflect on it, and I can come back from that.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It is personal, and you're right. It is okay to cry.
Totally.
And I think sometimes the crying isn't because you're frustrated. The crying is actually the release that you need sometimes to then charter the next step forward. Also, just to sit in that moment as well. So I think it's important. And thank you for that, because I think it's important that we understand that this journey of growth we know sometimes you come out with bruises from it, but actually it's then how you then respond accordingly, right? Do you put the badges on and say, okay, I now understand, let's go, or do you dwell in it and then cease to operate, and then in a way unknowingly shrink because you've now taken it in a way that doesn't necessarily enable you to grow, which is the other side that we never really talk about. But I do want us to sit in that for a little bit, because I think it's important, because businesses are transforming, and therefore there is this deep requirement for us to also personally evolve. And that means we might have to chart a different path for our careers. How is business transformation shaping career paths, Nadia?
We're at the precipice of an industrial revolution, the likes of which we've never seen in our lifetimes. And we will see the pace of change very quickly become almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And it is imperative that each of us that is an active member of the workforce today is building skills around AI,
Yes.
understanding its usage and relevance in your field, and understanding not just what's currently applicable in your field, but what's on the horizon. And not only understanding it, but playing with it, working with it, using it as a tool, and looking at the potential to unlock your own capacity by leveraging the tools. So I have a vision that the workforce of the not too distant future is somewhat bionic. It's human capability enhanced by technology. And it is about enhancing human capability, because what we know of AI is that it works best on models that are highly predictable and highly repeatable.
Yeah.
And we know that people are rarely predictable. And so, whilst we can use AI-enabled tools to enhance our productivity, what we should be doing with the time gained and the capacity gained is really deepening our EQ.
Yeah.
And honing our skills on relationship building and what it means to forge deeply meaningful relationships and how to leverage those relationships, because that's something that tech isn't able to do for us. So it's carving out the space where, as a workforce and a human element to the workforce, there is still a highly needed skill set.
And I think that's quite powerful, because I think at a point where there is a focus on tech and AI, how we build connection is so important, because that relationship is fundamental to what growth and progress looks like. The technology can give us some of the infrastructure to do certain things, but it's the people that and that collaboration and that networking that enables us to do it differently. Any tips on how to do it? If for someone that isn't necessarily always prone to going out and building your network, or even stepping into that element of curiosity and asking questions, any tips on how someone can do that?
Find what feels comfortable for you to dip your toes in. So whether it's podcasts, whether it's, online learning, whether it's attending conferences and seminars, find what works for you to start getting more comfortable around the content. And when you're comfortable around the content, it makes it less jarring to enter into different formats to learn even more.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot about understanding gaps, right? And I think part of it, like you're rightly saying, is knowing and understanding where your gaps are and working actively to close it. Is there anything that you can say around how you also do this? How do you, Nadia, see your gaps in this? Because you step into a space and there's desire of what you want to achieve, but then there's also the landscape, but then there's also understanding, okay, what are the gaps that I need, what I currently have, and how do I close it? How do you navigate, and how do you then stay ahead of the curve in that?
I'm working on my own AI fluency. I'm not a very techie person by nature. I mean, I can work my phone and my TV, and I can update them when it prompts me. So, for me, I do feel very much like a fish out of water. But by listening to podcasts from experts about what's on the horizon and what else the technology can do beyond what I'm using it for is really insightful and really eye-opening. Attending roundtables with my peer group and listening to how other HR leaders are applying different tools in their organizations has been immensely insightful. And practicing and playing with my own tools. So whatever we do have at our disposal. At work, we have Copilot. On my phone, I have ChatGPT, and using it as a tool to supplement what I would normally do, but to augment how I might approach things. And so even though I can write my own emails and I can write my own communications, it's fun to play with it and to put my thoughts, without having to spend a lot of time fine-tuning everything, just do a brain dump and see what it comes back with and tweak it and play with it and prompt more questions and practice different kinds of prompts. So I prompted for the first time the other day, find me the best time to book my next flights to New York, which, is a pretty basic prompt, but it's also giving me looking for those opportunities to play with it in ways that I wouldn't normally be instinctual for me.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's about how do we leverage the tech to do what we need to do, but also help us in plugging through what some of our gaps are and really then setting ourselves up for success. And actually this is interesting because not that it fulfills the gap and goes back against what we're saying about building those relationships, but for those that may not necessarily know where to start or have the network or know how to approach it, it can help you think about how you shape the conversations to then start to talk to people. Just like you were saying, it helps you with flights, it helps you understand it, but you still have to do the work anyway. You still have to book it yourself. And I think that's so important, which is using it to help you understand your gap, but still understanding that there is still a job for you to do. I think we're at a time where, because there's so much change happening, deep down, you want somebody to be able to just say, here's what you need to do. And sometimes you're not going to get that, but actually there's ways in which you can set yourself up to be able to get that information and maybe think about how you position yourself so that it feels less burdensome on you as well. I think which is an important point to make. I think there's something also about how leaders transform and, not leave underrepresented talent behind. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that, because we know when change is happening and the priorities might be on different things. Sometimes, not all, but sometimes how we bring people along, especially from underrepresented groups, isn't necessarily front of mind. Because the goal is, how do we grow? How do we transform? And yes, there are parts of that, but how can leaders ensure transformation doesn't leave underrepresented talent behind?
It takes effort. It takes a lot of concerted effort, and it takes a consciousness to recognize where you might have gaps in your existing format. So whatever forum you're talking about, whether it's a leadership team, a project team, and a resource group, what have you, the construct of that, if it's homogeneous to start with, there needs to be a level of self-awareness that that's the case, and a concerted effort to either change that construct or seek input from a diverse set of stakeholders to challenge your thinking and assumptions. And by doing that, by inviting the conversation and inviting the provocation of what are we missing, what aren't we seeing from a diverse panel, we're opening the door to, we're opening mindset to a different way of thinking, a different way of approaching challenges. But it's a concerted effort, and it starts with that recognition of, are we just sat here all pretty much the same, confirming each other's thoughts because we all think the same and we all have similar experiences.
That's quite powerful. And actually that leads into some of the thoughts that I think about, I think Dr. Zelia King had this thing called the personal boardroom, which speaks to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Who in that boardroom will connect you, will challenge you, will guide you, will mentor you. And I think and also anchor you to remind you of who you are and how much you carry, and never dimming your light. I think there is something about, and you talk, I think that's been an undertone in the message you've been sharing about just how we build our networks, because the change will always happen. But actually what helps us in that personal evolution is about the networks. And I know you spoke from a leadership lens, but I think this also carries through to those maybe not in leadership roles, right? That are trying to find themselves in the process, and maybe not finding the answers, but actually looking around your network around you and asking them, what are the things I am not thinking about that I should think about?
Yeah.
So that I
Yeah.
too don't get left behind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And, one of the things I think really is really important is, and I know for some people on this call, when you are in certain spaces, you might be the only person that's gone to university, the only person that's probably migrated in your family to another country to start anew, the only person that's reached director level. Sometimes you are often seen as the blueprint, and you enter corporate spaces. And I think corporate spaces sometimes are meant to humble you as well as making you grow. And it's challenging sometimes. And you want to remain authentic. You want to keep your authenticity. How do we navigate that? How is the role of, remaining authentic in the environment that you're in, the individual's job or the organization's job, or both? Where's the ownership in that?
So your own authenticity is your responsibility, right? You are the one that is in control of how you show up. That doesn't mean that there aren't external influences, and you have to really know yourself really well to remain true to yourself and maintain that authenticity. And that is not always easy. And very often, especially in underrepresented families, especially if you are being held up as the blueprint, those lines get blurrier and blurrier. And one thing I've learned from my own family experience, so I'm the child of immigrants. I'm first generation. That came with a lot of expectations and pressures and cultural norms that weren't normal in the culture I was raised in. And it can be really hard to tap into how much of this is expectations being placed on me versus what I want. And so that's a journey only you can go on. And how deeply you're able to get to know yourself and your own drivers is a very personal thing.
Mm-hmm.
As organizations, the responsibility that we have is to provide the safe space for people to show up as themselves. And even if they're on a journey personally, for us to support with a lot of empathy that we're all on a journey. And so that, yes, it is both.
Mm-hmm.
And organizations absolutely have a responsibility in how we create those safe spaces, how we make it okay to talk about the uncomfortable, how we make it very clear that inclusion is not about fitting in, but being safe to stand out, feeling safe to challenge and speak your mind and share a different opinion without that fear of any retaliation. So, or feeling like you're going to get told off and you need to shrink. So it's both, and it's complicated.
Yeah. And I think that's hard, right? Because I think there is your job, and there's an ownership in this, but there's also, I think you come into an organization sometimes expecting, you go through the recruitment process, you ask what the culture is, and then sometimes it doesn't meet what you thought. And you then start asking yourself, wait, what did I sign up for? And then you start to challenge yourself. You feel challenged about that. Do I remain authentic too, or do I change or acclimatize so that I can grow
Yeah.
in this organization. And I think the question I would ask you next is around, how do you make sure you feel seen and valued, especially in the journey of authenticity? And can you share a moment when you felt truly seen, truly valued, truly understood?
Cultural fit is a really tricky concept, right? Because we hear about it all the time, right? Is this person a good fit for our culture? If you think about fitting in and the word fit in general, the perception of it, you can conceptualize it, you can visualize, fitting in, right? And by definition, inclusion shouldn't be about whether or not you fit a certain mold. It should be about the acceptance that your differences are your strength.
Yes.
And what makes each of us different is exactly what will provoke the right level of conversation for us to derive true value from our work, and making sure that our work is meaningful and purposeful, but also drives the right results and outcomes. Because when people are allowed to think freely and outside the box and challenge ideas, we unleash the power of what is possible rather than confirming and reconfirming what's always been done.
Yeah.
So be wary of those that look for fit. Cultural alignment to values is what we should be talking about instead, and shifting the conversation to talk about, how do my values align with the organization's values? How does the organization demonstrate its commitment to values? Culture is ultimately the aggregated behaviors that are consistently accepted and rewarded.
That's a powerful point.
So when we talk about culture, and when we talk about changing a culture and why it's so difficult to change a culture, it's because it's built on micro moments of behaviors that have either been systemically, historically, consistently rewarded. And sometimes those rewards are unspoken. When we look the other way at behavior that is not aligned to what we have plastered on the walls, that's affecting our culture. So it is that's why it's deeply difficult to affect cultural change, and why we should be wary of striving for cultural fit. What we should be looking for is striving for alignment to values.
I love that. And I think that's probably the first time I've heard someone break it down like that. Because a lot of times you come in because you want to, and actually that should probably be a shape in how you ask the questions in your interview around what's the culture.
Yeah.
But actually, what are the values that you see embodied in this organization? Because then you as the individual can then say, how does this align with me and my positioning?
Yeah.
That's quite powerful. And I actually, it fits with something I read this morning. A friend of mine posted something and she said there's culture and then there's culture. But actually, if you look at culture from that lens, you're only looking at it based on your cultural identity, and you hoping that organization will fit in with your cultural identity. And if you were raised in a time where everyone tells you shh and respect your elders, and you come into that and you're expecting that everyone just shh and you're going to progress, it's a misalignment in your culture. But actually, if you come in and say, what are the values beyond the words, like you said, or actually what are the everyday behaviors that you see embodied, And you can then get a bigger picture of what exactly you're stepping into. So you don't come in there and you say, oh, there's a misalignment with the culture, because you would have asked the right questions from the onset. These are nuggets I don't think I heard in the earlier parts of my career, and I really value that.
One of the questions I always ask when I'm interviewing for a job, right? Not when I'm interviewing someone, but when I'm interviewing, I always ask what behaviors get rewarded. What are the behaviors that equate to success in this organization?
Yeah.
Don't ask about the culture. You'll get a list of words that are on a website or on posters on the walls, and you won't be able to derive any substance from that.
Yeah.
Ask what behaviors are rewarded and valued. What behaviors does it take to succeed?
I'm saving that now, dear. But actually, you're right, because it then breaks down that perception that's in front of you of, I have to operate in this way. Because a lot of people come in and they think, as long as I do what I need to do, put my head down, then that's going to get me to where I need to be. But actually, if you ask the question, then they will tell you, no, you need to be proactive. You need to network. You need to, you need to position yourself as an asset.
You do, and you have to show that you are valuable. So you can't just come in and put your head down and do your job every day, because you're just going to keep doing that same job every day.
Yeah. And then you're going to be frustrated.
And you will get very quickly, or maybe not very quickly, maybe you're fine with that. But if you're not fine with that, you will be frustrated, and you'll be sat there going, how come no one's recognizing how hard I work? But who's advocating for you if you're not advocating for yourself? So you need allies, you need mentors, you need coaches, you need sponsors, and you need to know the difference between each of those things. And you need to know who those people are for you. And those people should be a diverse set of people. It's about the personal boardroom again, right? If your personal boardroom is looking a lot like you need to shake things up a bit, because you're not giving yourself the benefit of a wide variety of input and feedback and perceptions.
100%. And actually, it challenges, because sometimes there is safety in your known territory.
We're wired that way.
Yeah.
Humans are hardwired to gravitate towards what is familiar. That's why we don't like change. Our brains are wired to see change as a threat. It sparks our fight or flight mode. And this is deeply rooted. It's evolutionary. It's not something that we're going to change by flipping a switch. So we have to be conscious of it, and we have to be aware of what triggers that fight or flight. And we have to be consciously aware of the fact that we all have unconscious biases. We all gravitate towards people that are like us.
And growth doesn't happen in one singular circle of
growth does not come from being comfortable, ever. If you are comfortable, you are not growing.
And I think that's hard, because there's a rewiring that is happening here, which is probably what you were told to do, or how you've perceived, your career could be. But I think once you start to reframe it this way, it makes you see things differently, because this goes back to the intro. The businesses are changing. Expectation is changing.
Yeah.
The pressure is changing. And I think sometimes it does make you ask yourself, okay, so is this the place that I should be in right now? That's a confronting question, but it's an important question, because you're doing a self-analysis of your capacity to carry through in the environment that you're in, but also it makes you then to challenge yourself about, what is my next step? What does growth now mean for me? And I know we're coming at a time where everybody, there's a lot happening. And I think sometimes when there's a lot happening, that you can feel tired and it can burn you out. But actually, that's the whole point of that accountable circle, right? The network, the personal board.
And knowing what you want, right? So I'm a firm believer there's never a good time. There's no such thing as the perfect time for something. Right? Opportunities come when they come, and it's up to you to recognize this is an opportunity and I'm going to lean into it. And sometimes legitimately it might not be the right time, right? I had a speaker coach type person at a conference I attended a while back who had thrown out the kind of principle that you should never have more than 3 big changes going on in your life at the same time, right? So if you're getting married and buying a house and having a baby, it's probably not the right time to change jobs. So, there will be times when it's legitimately not the right time. But I have had a baby and changed jobs at the same time. And I very easily could have said to myself, I'm not going to go for this job. It's not the right time. I'm about to have a baby. But I knew what I wanted, and I knew my career path, and what I wanted next for my career. And when that job became available, despite the fact that I was about to go on maternity leave, I pulled my manager aside and said, I still want to be considered.
And I think that's important because I did the same. It's why I'm at Euromonitor. I said to myself, I need this change now, and this is the right time for it. It doesn't make sense on paper, but actually there's a moment where that change happened, and I then joined 9 months postpartum. And I think that in that journey itself, it doesn't mean smooth sailing. It just means I'm in another phase of growth in my career.
Exactly. Sometimes you just have to jump in whether you're prepared or not.
What is prepared?
What is prepared? It's a figment of our imagination. Do we ever really feel ready for most big changes?
No.
So just jump in. What's the worst that's going to happen? At least you can say you tried.
Exactly. I'm so mindful. I know there's questions coming in. I want to ask, I may ask just one more question, and I'm going to open it up. We talked a lot about a lot of different things. Like, I want to go into them a lot further, but this is the privilege of having you as my boss. We can table that for later. But for those that are online, bringing us back to what the aim of today is, understanding you're the asset. Nadia, what does it mean to be an asset in today's workplace, and how can people position themselves as an asset?
Deliver value. Just deliver value. And that shows up in a lot of different ways, right? It's being willing to lean into things that are outside your normal scope. It's putting your hand up and volunteering when another teammate needs help. It's, showing up with value is never uttering the words, that's not my job.
Say that.
And it's one of my biggest pet peeves, someone that's on my team. But and the reason why it is one of my pet peeves is it's because it's the quickest way to devalue yourself in the eyes of your organization. Your organization wants people that are willing to show up, show commitment, show engagement, show excitement, do a good job, and lean in where it's needed. And that's how you add value beyond just ticking the box of doing your job. Anyone can show up and do the job.
Yeah.
Can you deliver value in how you do that? Can you present yourself as an asset to the business, someone that is a team player that is willing to do the things that are out of the ordinary and lean in where it's necessary? Those things go a long way, and they are remembered. And they're also a really good way to make yourself visible. And
visibility is key. I know people say that everyone can say I'm an introvert or whatever it is, but you need to manage your introverted, extroverted natures with visibility. Is knowing, and I don't think it's just being visible, it's knowing how to be visible, being strategic and intentional in that. Because as I said to someone that I was mentoring recently, there's knowing how to, your ability to deliver is based on your build your credibility, but how you know how to enter conversations and seek and present yourself and position yourself is a strategical way of catapulting your growth mentally, not just even within your career.
And it takes proactively looking for those opportunities to insert yourself in ways that are outside the norm.
And you can't proactively know those ways unless you become a little bit visible.
Exactly. Exactly. It means talking to people outside your team. It means, you know, getting into the office and chatting up people that you don't normally interact with, finding out what's going on in different teams.
Yeah. I've got some questions from the audience because I know we have about 14 more minutes left. So if there's any more questions, please put them in.
Let's take some questions.
Okay, the first question is, how do you overcome setbacks in your career?
You dust yourself off and you try again. Same as any setback. You dust yourself off and you try again. Learn from it. I think there's always something to be learned from a setback. Seek out the people that will be honest with you and give you feedback on why it wasn't a success.
Yeah.
And work with that. Be open, right? Be open, be willing to reflect, and take responsibility for what you own in that. And if there's gaps that need closing, figure out how you're going to close those gaps, but dust yourself off and try again.
Yeah. Someone asked, and I think it's an interesting question based on something you said about the behaviors. They said, what are the behaviors that are typically rewarded in an organization?
It depends on the organization.
It
And this
does.
is what makes different companies really unique and special. And this is why not all companies are created equal, right? So I've worked for companies where I felt a massive discomfort with the behaviors that I would see rewarded, or the behaviors that were allowed to continue. And I've worked in organizations where, you know, it's humble, it's passionate, it's excitement, it's collaboration, and those are the organizations that I absolutely have cherished working for. So it's not always the same, but it can definitely manifest itself in lots of interesting ways.
Awesome. I've got a okay. I'm gonna try and read them as much as I can. So someone said, what's the best advice you've ever gotten? And also, what's the worst one?
The worst was I was once told, and I was fairly young and impressionable in my career at the time, but I was once told, don't worry, you're pretty, so you'll be fine. That was damaging. The best advice I've received. Oh, there's lots of really good nuggets that I've picked up along the way. My favorite, and the one that I quote often, and I've slipped it in once already here tonight, is my dear friend Nelson Derry always says, your difference is and always will be your greatest strength.
I resonate with that. Because sometimes you feel your differences are the things that make you not fit in, but I think,
and that's exactly why it's important. It's very easy to feel othered.
Yeah.
In especially when so much of societal norms are about conformity. And so it's very easy to feel othered.
Yeah.
But taking that moment to step back and go, no, I've worked hard to get here. I am credible in this space. And what's different is what's given me that power.
Yeah. I've got another question, which is, how do you deal with blocks, like with people with office dynamics? And also, I'm going to add to that question, how do you navigate or resolve conflicts throughout your career? So if someone, I'm guessing someone that's navigating conflict in environments or people, how do you, any tips on how you navigate that?
Yeah, we don't love, I mean, nobody goes, yay, a conflict. They can be very uncomfortable to navigate, but I think starting with a bit of humility and starting with a direct, gentle approach to approach that person and signal, I'd really like to talk about, you know, whatever interaction and how it made me feel.
Yeah.
And when we position things from our perspective and how I feel, it diffuses tension and it allows the listener to, instead of being defensive, want to listen into, I've had an impact on how you feel. So approaching it from that perspective and just and approaching it quickly. You don't want to let too much time linger. Head on, privately, and with humility. I would say are the key anchors to having a productive conversation.
Absolutely. I think, and heavy on the private actually, because sometimes you can resolve things behind closed doors. I think it's knowing, I think a lot of the times we don't always know how to conflict resolute. We know how to conflict. But actually, a lot of the times people get frustrated in roles because you haven't known how to kind of silence it out. And I think sometimes there's the expectation that it's like, whose job is that to do that? Is it the manager? Is it the individual? But I also know from a well-being perspective, it's important that you figure out how to conflict resolute, because it can be a blocker in how you then interact, right?
It's so much more powerful when you approach these things yourself, rather than relying on your manager to mediate them for you. If it's genuinely a really difficult challenge, you know, something that's borderline, you know, inappropriate or yes, sometimes it can help to have somebody mediating the conversation if you think it's going to escalate. But most of the time, figuring out a way to navigate it yourself and approach it yourself gives you more credibility.
Yeah.
It gives your voice more power. When you're relying on someone else to relay a message for you, you've given them the power.
Yeah.
Don't give away your power. You own it.
Yeah.
Stand up for yourself.
And I guess, and you know what, and I hear people in the messages, I can hear you even when you're typing, because I know a lot of the times when you're in this space, you don't want to be perceived differently. And I think there is this balance of being firm in the spaces and having those conversations. But I know a lot of the times people come in there with the perception that they're going to perceive me as this, they're going to perceive me as that. So I have to be extra mindful of how I show up. But I do think it's still important that you walk into spaces with the authority that you hold. You know, I'm a firm believer sometimes that even when it's not easy to, your actual growth comes from still sometimes being able to show up and hold that space, because it reduces the feeling of the person's taken over or they've made me feel this way, even if they had. But actually, you have the power to redirect that energy and show up even better. And I think sometimes we forget that this is part, there's many layers to this journey in our career and in corporate. And I always say to people, how you grow from this is going to be a lifeline from somebody else that's going to go through it. So you're sometimes, even though we don't like to go through something, and it's not self-imposed, it actually can be the biggest lessons for somebody else going through. So handle it in the way that you would do if you're advising somebody else. Because I think you won't tell them go back and do whatever. You would tell them be measured, be calm.
Yeah.
Take control.
Yeah.
I've got two more. I know we've got 5 more minutes. Someone asked a really important question. There's 2 important questions. One around transformation and AI. They said, hi, I have led organization transformation and AI adoption. What opportunities do you see for AI to complement the traditional mentoring and community networks? And what risks might arise if we over-index on tech without human and cultural context that has always been so critical to our success? That's a big question.
That's a really big question. Tech projects should be people projects. If you're implementing technology transformations and AI transformations, and you're not doing it in close partnership with your people function, you're going to have a lot of really great tech and not a lot of really great engaged people. So tech projects should be people focused and co-led between your tech leader and your people leader to maintain that lens. The question around AI and mentoring is really, really interesting. So I think there's a few different applications, right? If we think not in the not too distant future, what does it look like for AI tools to be a pseudo mentor? So that's one avenue. But even in the current climate, there are tools that are brilliant at playing matchmaker for organizations in ways that would take humans, lots of manual labor to crack, and can match people up across organizations or outside or across external networks in ways that can drive really meaningful partnerships with not a lot of admin work involved. So any which way you look at it, whether it's the immediate application or thinking into the future, it's exciting.
And a final question, because I'm mindful we've got 2 more minutes. Someone recently got promoted, and they're now the only person of color in leadership meetings. How do you deal with that pressure? But also, how could they deal with that pressure, and how do they ensure that they show up authentically?
Well, first of all, congratulations. You have a gift and a responsibility. So the gift is that you have opened a pathway of what is possible for everyone looking up at you, wondering if they could ever make it to that table. That is equally a responsibility. And all leadership roles are like swimming in a fishbowl. Everybody's watching what you're doing, and everybody can see what you're doing. So show up authentically, with purpose, with intentionality, lean into the challenging conversations, and be that role model of what is possible. Easy to say, difficult to live and breathe.
Yeah. And I know that sometimes it's that pressure also to feel like you can't put a foot wrong can be quite burdensome. But actually, I think there's a rewiring in this, right? Which is you're in the space because you're supposed to be in the space. You got that promotion because you were amazing at it. But actually, be amazing.
Yeah, just show up and do how you showed up to get there. Just keep showing up in the same way, right? I don't know. We all go through feelings of imposter syndrome at some point or another.
Yeah.
And it's completely normal. But when you normalize it and you own it and you embrace it and you acknowledge that, yeah, this is making me a little bit nervous, or this scares me a bit. That's not a bad thing. That one, it's your brain's way of saying, hey, wake up, you care a lot about this, so focus and pay attention to it. But also balance it with it's a moment in humility and vulnerability as well. And it's okay to say, I don't have all the answers, and I'm relying on those around me to help me shape that. How many times have I said that to you, Aoife, and our leadership team?
Literally,
I don't have all the answers. And I can honestly sit here and say, I do not have all the answers. But what I do know is that I need to surround myself on my team with brilliant people that collectively we will come up with the right answers. And it's okay to say that. It's actually, I prefer leaders that are willing to say they don't have all the answers than those that are too afraid to say that and then just make it up.
But I think it's right. And I think this speaks to your character. You always talk a lot about trusting your team, right? But you also emphasize on work together with your team. collaboratively. And I think when you've stepped into this promotion and you're working with other leaders in an environment or a team dynamic you haven't, you have to, I think a mentor always said something to me, is that at that leadership level, everybody wants something from each other. So you need to know how to make that exchange in the most healthiest of way, so you can get what you want and they can get what they want.
Relationships are always reciprocal, right? Even in our personal lives, when you have a friend that's a taker and you don't get anything back, you eventually abandon that friend. So relationships are always reciprocal. It's no different in business. And so one thought I'll leave you with, because I'm conscious we are at time, is you didn't get to your role alone. What makes you think that you can sustain it alone? We all need people around us to help us navigate, especially when it's the most challenging times.
Yeah. So basically, surround yourself.
Surround yourself and choose that boardroom wisely.
Thank you. I think we're at time. Bumi's now come back onto the stage. So Nadia, any final thoughts before we close off?
It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation, and I hope you got something valuable from it. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
I think, Adeife, I would like to hear some final words from you as well.
I think the one thing I would say is your journey is unique. Challenges will arise. The greatest leaders weren't the ones that didn't face challenges, but actually use their challenges to make them the best versions of themselves. So not everything is going to break you, but actually some things are going to make you into the best version that makes you proud of who you are in the long run. And as Nadia said earlier, it's okay to cry. But also, don't dwell for too long. Know how to pick yourself back up so that you can go for gold. That's what I'm saying.
All right, we have a lot of thank yous in the chat box, but I think from the emojis, you can see that this was a very, very thoroughly enjoyed session. I have a lot of thank you for this. I'm just going to read quickly 2 people. So I have, thank you so much for this session. I have a, thank you. This has been an interesting conversation and I'm gaining quite a bit of insight. We have a thank you for the webinar. It has been really, really amazing. All right, you guys. So in the chat box, we have dropped our job board link for access to job openings, mentorship programs, and upcoming events. Of course, if you want to, you should connect with Adeife and Nadia on LinkedIn. We highly recommend that you do that. If you search their names out, it will come out on LinkedIn. If you need more information, please send an email across to us. We're more than happy to take that. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been an amazing session. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Adeife. Enjoy the rest of your evenings, everyone, and anticipate the next Euromonitor event. I think you know what to expect.
You know what to expect.
You know what to expect. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Nadia.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun.